Ja, guten Morgen und herzlich willkommen zum Vortrag Die Kinder, die aus dem Islamischen Staat zurückkehren. Diese Präsentation wird mitgeschnitten, wird aufgenommen, aber nicht der Chat und auch nicht.
So, hello and welcome to my presentation. We have about 30 minutes for the presentation, and at midday there will be a Q&A session. So after my presentation, you will not have the possibility to ask questions, but you can post them in the chat. This presentation is going to be recorded, but what is written in the chat and the questions will not be recorded. My name is Sofia Koller, and I'm a senior research analyst at the Berlin office of the Counter Extremism Project. It is an international organization focusing on research, political support, and we also deal with different types of radicalization. And I've also worked as a research fellow at the German Council on Foreign Relations, and I also led the International Forum for Expert Exchange on Countering Islamist Extremism. And the management of people coming back from Iraq was one of the topics, in particular children and women. And that's the reason for choosing this topic today. But there are at least two further presentations on this topic that I can share with you. So an input from InfoX from March. And there will be later on another presentation on June the 8th that perfectly complements my presentation today. So first of all, today we're going to talk about children who are coming back from the Islamic State, children who had been living in this state for many years. They were born and they then come back to their home country. Just a couple of words on the background. So the role of children in the Islamic State, you may know that IS wants to create a state, and that's the reason for the name. And well, they actually managed to do so for many years. And in a state, it is important not only to fight, but also to create a society. And children play a very important role in this concept of state for the next generation. So children are included in the propaganda, as you can see in this picture. And there is also a very strict education by the IS state. So they are prepared to fight since the very beginning, since they are very early. And then they are also educated by their mothers. And it is very important to also mention that, well, it is not only about children coming from abroad, but also children from specific regions of Iraq. These children may not have been participating in the ISIS state, but they fall within their influence. And so they have somehow accepted the Islamic State and their way of living, even though they do not belong to it. Another important factor is the ideological indoctrination, and children play a very important role, as we can see. So they fear punishments, and this is typical of children who are taught to distinguish between what is right and what is wrong, and they have also physical punishment. Children have always played a central role in homicides, and also in training and education, and parents want their children to be active. There is an example of Isidore, for example, who, when he was 6 years old, was sent to soldier education. And not all parents do so, but there are some parents who force their children to be educated as fighters. In the case of children coming back to their home country, one of the major challenges is the psychosocial support in order to properly manage these children. It also depends on the experience they had in the Islamic State. It is important to overcome their fears, and for this reason, it is very important to focus on the needs of these children, but we also have to comply with security and safety risks, and this is a very difficult topic, and that's the reason why it is always difficult to manage these situations. Another important element that I think it is important in the long run is here. Well, the slide is a bit busy, and what I want to say is that when they go to the Islamic State, well, let's say in 2012, the Islamic State was created, and then they flew to other countries, and then there was a military victory, and for many years these children may have stayed in camps, in refugee camps, for example in Syria, and so repatriation is another topic, because many foreign children and their mothers and men are still in Iraq and in camps in northern Iraq, in northern Syria. So we are talking about a decade, and you can well imagine children, if they moved in 2014, are now 12 years old. And those who were born in the camp know nothing than the context of the Islamic State or the context of a training of a camp in northern Syria. And for this reason, it is very important to consider their experiences. I was told, for example, that a child came back to France, and well, she did not, she saw a woman without a veil, without a cover, and so she was surprised, and this is simply because that child has never seen a woman without a veil, and this is connected to her experience. In the second part of my presentation, I'd like to present the first country example, Germany. In Germany, well, the return was originally on a voluntary basis, and so children came to Germany on a voluntary basis, but now we have repatriations, and as you can see, we have 5 times organized a repatriation 5 times in the meantime, and you see in the table that children below 7 years of age are the majority, and these children do not have the possibility of enjoying a good integration process in the German society, and this is a major challenge. We should not also forget that the age should not be relevant, must not be relevant, because children have the right to the same level of protection, regardless of their age, if they are 17 or 7 years old. And then, as you can see below, between 2019 to 2022, 70 children have been repatriated, and 22 were adults. A peculiarity in Germany is that repatriation occurs with the relevant mothers. So repatriation is focused on children, and then women in their role as mothers are also repatriated. Children are not separated locally, and then as soon as children arrive in Germany, they are separated from their mothers, because mothers have to go in prison, and this well, relationship they had in the ISIS state leads to re-traumatization once the children are repatriated during the pandemic. They had limited permit to visit their mothers in prison, and this was a further problem and a further difficulty. And well, there are not enough institutions where children can, for example, live in prison together with their mothers, especially the youngest ones. In Germany, for the coordination of repatriated children, an institute was set up in 2019. Directives were issued by the Ministry for Justice so that children could be properly protected. However, the structure is up to the relevant regions. Unlike France, that I will explain later, in Germany, the Länder, the regions, can decide what players and which institutions can play a role in managing the repatriated children. And another important thing to point out is that all these elements play an important role. Here you see the case management with the involvement of different players, because we don't have only to do with children, but also mothers with one or multiple children. And so the coordination plays a very important role. And it is also important to provide expertise with specific specialists who know what context they lived in and how to cope with the difficulties so that they can be properly repatriated. And then we have the question of schools and kindergartens that have to be properly informed about their experience in order to facilitate their integration. And then there are some challenges. For example, in some cases, there are different evaluations by the Jugendamt and by the other institutions. And so mothers, for example, can take care of their children. This is the assessment by one institution, and the opposite assessment is given by another institution. And this can jeopardize the situation of children. And so we must try and treat children properly. And if children are deprived of their mothers, we run the risk of causing further difficulties. And then we have also a lack of resources, and repatriated children are often neglected. So it is important to define the right strategy for overcoming the trauma of children. It is important that all the stakeholders remain closely in contact with one another. Then we have in Germany the contact, for example, with tutor families, and this is very important. It happens often that children are given integrated in a family, or they have the chance of staying in prison with their mothers. And in this respect, the schools play an important role. Next country case, France. In France, 500 children were repatriated with and without their mothers, and 35 children have been repatriated since 2019, especially orphans and children without their mothers. It often happens that children are repatriated and their mothers have to stay in the camp, and so they come on their own. Sorry, the sound is very bad. Guidelines have been published in France as well, defining the roles and responsibilities of the individual stakeholders. And so again, in France, there is written documents defining the roles and tasks of each individual actor involved in the management of repatriated children. The mothers and children are always separated. especially for the first period. After the repatriation, there is a focus on a psychological assessment, and then it may be possible that we have an imprisonment, so the person has to go to prison, or that we have a psychotherapeutical treatment and integration in schools. In France, there are families who take care of the repatriated children, especially in the first period, and visits to their mothers must be feasible. The hierarchical situation is very similar to that in Germany. So here on the left, you see that the children and young support institution, ASE, plays an important role, and also the health institute. We also have a service to prevent radicalization. And in this case, there is a coordinator who is in charge of defining which stakeholders should be in charge of the children. So, for example, there was a problem in Paris with children coming at the airport in Paris, and there were problems with families and with a lack of resources. So this may lead to problems among the stakeholders. So you always have to make sure that you have enough families who can take care of the children being repatriated. Then within the hierarchy, we also have a security authority, prefecture, but these are, let's say, separate from the coordination. Let's now come to the third country report, which is a bit different from the other two, but it should be considered within the context of the problems that France and Germany may have, and another country such as Iraq may have, which is completely different. It is important, first of all, to say that well, for Germany and France, sorry about the sound is really very bad.
Tatsächlich ist es so, dass die Mehrheit der 10.000 Lager immer oder und die Racheaktionen im Mai 2020 hatte etwa 410 45 Kinder, ungefähr die Hälfte Jungen und Mädchen. Auch mit 11 Monaten gab es eine Beeinflussung von Tausenden von Familien. Das heißt, wir reden über ganz andere Zahlen hier. Dann ist es so, dass die Rache ca. 50.000 Personen rekrutiert haben. Ghana ist auch über die Hälfte zum Tode verkommen. Diesen Personen sind zwar auch dritte ausländische Frauen in Nigeria, aber eben auch Nigeria aus Islamic State. Wiederum andere Personen und einfach diese Masse an Personen, eine krasse Überbelegung. Also im Touristen die Rede von einer Überbelegung von 455%. Eine Reihe von Herausforderungen. Die Mehrheit der Jugendlichen ist im Alter von 15 bis 18 Jahren. Aber es gibt auch Kinder, die inhaftiert sind, die erst 9 Jahre alt sind. Im Hintergrund ab 9 können im Irak mit Terrorismus verurteilt werden und in kurdischen Gebieten ab 10 Jahre alt. Und gleich dazu in den USA auch ich sehe gerade, dass jemand Audio ist. Okay,
yeah, the sound is unfortunately very bad, so the translation cannot be performed.
Die Verbindung eigentlich ganz gut.
Well, the connection should actually be very good, but unfortunately we cannot hear. Sorry, but the translation will be discontinued until the sound problem is solved.
Genau, und alles interessant fand, die statische Sicherheit 1022, also die Wohlzuhörhaltungen. Was uns ganz bekannt wird, ist, die werden aus der Jugendjustiz sich auf Anschlägen auf statische Sicherheit geschlossen haben, Checkpoints in die Luft gejagt, Sprengsätze gebaut, also wir Kindersoldaten, Ausbildungsplatz gibt,
Frau Koller, ja? Entschuldigung, dass ich Sie einmal unterbreche.
Sorry for interrupting you, but unfortunately we cannot hear you any longer.
Insofern, wenn Sie eine Möglichkeit haben, vielleicht ein LAN-Kabel zu nutzen oder die Audioqualität.
I don't know if you can somehow improve the sound, because it is now really difficult to follow you. So if you can find another solution, because we cannot hear you any longer. Okay, if you can just wait a second, I will take LAN cable and connect via LAN. All right, so you can break for a second, waiting for the speaker to take the LAN cable so that we can start again in a minute. Thank you. So here I am again. Can you please tell me if you can hear me better? Okay, if you can just go on speaking, because I have the impression it is stable. So I have tried and connect a LAN cable. Well, you are a little bit frozen, but let's try. So please go on and we will see whether we can understand you. Okay. Sorry, I did not look at the chat, but I hope you could follow some of the points. Otherwise, we have also the Q&A session, and we will have certainly another occasion to go into the details. So I have just come back from Iraq. And I saw children who are in the camp. There are children who are 9 years old. Unfortunately, the sound is still very bad, so the translation will be discontinued again. Sorry for the problem.
Für Ihre Geduld bedanken und vielleicht gleich eine Frage. Der einmalige Reizwort in den haben Taten zugegeben und es eigentlich nur um quasi den macht unabhängig eigentlich, wie stark sie beim waren, aber eigentlich werden Kinder auch und es gibt auch gerade bei den Kinder, die dann 18 Hilfe bekommen. Ja, trotzdem nicht gut. Gut, ich werde vielleicht Herausforderungen also schade, dass es hier jetzt genau, aber dann mache ich noch ganz kurz fertig. Also einige herausgewählt, auch Deutsch. Einmal habe ich erwähnt, die Politisierung und Trennung von Bezugspersonen, auch die Infrastruktur in Haft umzubauen ist. Eine in eine Liste von Personen, die eine Einrichtung kommen können. Diese retraumatisiert und für die eben auch vor allem Kinder schwierig. Und dann auch noch selten Vorurteile oder urteilsbasierte Akteure zum Thema Salatismus und Dschihadismus, aber zum Thema auch Komplettierungen, Mischung von Täter-Opferrolle, aber auch ganz banale der Unterschied von Religion und Ideologie zum Beispiel. Das ist auch schwierig, zur Fachexpertise zu bekommen, also eben Kinder- und Jugendtherapie in Kombination mit Behandlung von Kita. Und das wird sicherlich eine Schwierigkeit bleiben, wenn die Kinder, die dann in die Pubertät kommen, zum Beispiel auch Fragen und schließlich mitgeführt werden sollten und eine weitere.
So, what are some of the challenges? We have multiple challenges, as you could see, but we also have some best practices that have been now available. And for example, in the coordination of the different cases, it is important to provide for a proactive and individual repatriation management, because as we repeated multiple times, the welfare and the well-being of children must be the focus of all the efforts, because children are victims, and only if necessary, security and safety authorities should be included. What is needed is a multi-professional approach, so a long-term access to psychosocial and psychotherapeutical consultancy. And in this respect, it is also important to train the different stakeholders working in the Jugendamt and in the other institutions. Thank you very much for your attention. I do apologize for the technical problems, but I hope we will have the chance of going into the details of my topics. I hope that you could follow at least part of it. I'm fully available for questions now in the chat and later during the Q&A session. Thank you.